Frank for being the coordinator for the evening. Frank, I think should we get straight into
Yep.
it?
Yep.
Les, are you hearing us okay? Not hearing you, but we can.
How's that?
That's better. Now we can hear
Okay,
you. We're
right.
in business. Okay. Well, shall we kick things off and get going? Or
Yes.
so if we go straight onto
There
onto
we
the
go.
slide.
There we go.
That's a reminder just as to who we are and what we're here to talk about this evening. So we just move on to the second. Now, this listing, let me just jump to item 6. I think a number of people may know this already, but sadly, Edward died about a week ago. We had spoken to the family when he went into hospital about using some of his material tonight, and they were very keen that we did. So I just want everyone to recognise Edward really did very much enjoy participation in the postal history and was in his 90s driving to the meeting. Subsequently, got a lift into the meeting, but very clearly enjoyed his attendance. So I picked a few little bits and pieces out of the material that Alan Shatton and I, on behalf of the family, are finding homes for. But it's a sad loss, and he was a lovely man, and will be much missed. John Boycott is not with us other than in spirit, and I can tell you, having spoken to,
I put.
sorry,
Sorry.
having spoken to John Boycott this evening, he's got a bit of a cold, but otherwise sounded in good form. I told him that we were going to use some of his material tonight, and he was chuffed about that. And anyone who knows John Boycott would anticipate that as his reaction. And so I will be showing him when Ted Gallagher and I go to see him next week, on Thursday of next week, what we're showing tonight. So a sad loss in the case of Edward Brentnall. John Boycott still very enthusiastic and still enjoying his connections to Philately, and we always take something to show him by way of Philately. He's now in a nursing home out along what road am I thinking of? I was going to say Monash, but it's the Monash Highway rather than the freeway. Okay, shall we get started? If you go on to the first slide, then if you would. And this is from John Boycott's material, and it's really the emphasis on options of going through the Mediterranean for mail, both going to the same place from different origins, but the option was to go via Southampton or via Marseille. Two of these are in there. The first via Southampton took 50 days to get to Sydney, and I'm using Sydney as a parameter. I know they're addressed to Melbourne, but I'm using Sydney because the tablet gives you that data most easily. This was 2 shillings, which puts this above an ounce weight, but the letter does refer to enclosures, so that is possibly quite right, and it is considerably thicker paper than is the item on the right via Marseille. So it went Southampton, Marseille, so it still goes through the Mediterranean, Malta, Alexandria, Suez, Gaul in Sri Lanka, then to Australia, and I haven't gone through the King George Sound, etc., etc. The other one goes overland, and I'll show you a map to remind us of this in a moment. Goes overland through France directly by rail down to Marseille, and then goes Marseille, and then it goes virtually the same route as the other cover. But this one, despite the fact that it had the shorter start, took 86 days to get to Sydney. They had rudder failure after Gaul, and they had to go to Mauritius for rudder repairs. Interesting, 2 shillings for the via Southampton because of the weight, but 9 pence for the quarter ounce by the more direct route via Marseille, of which I think on that sort of date, and we're talking, and I should have really emphasised this, 1860, was 4 pence was the rate going through France. So fivepence would be the basic rate. It may have been threepence, actually. Threepence, beg your pardon, threepence. So that was the additional cost for the faster rail, but unfortunately the vessel let it down. But two examples. John was always very interested in the wool trade because he had some background in that area, and these were both letters related to the handling of wool. The next one, thank you, Frank. Now, anyone who's going to say, "What the hell has this got to do with the Mediterranean?" It's a letter from Mayfair, hard to see on the front, but it's a twopenny penny post, unpaid, from Mayfair. Twopence being the indication of the rate, and it's 1817, as shown by the timing of arrival on the 27th of June in 1817. At New Inn, and it's to a solicitor. The logic of the whole thing, though, hangs on the signature, which as soon as I looked at the letter, checking this out for trying to find a home for it for John, is Edward Codrington. And I thought, I know that name. So we go on to the next slide. I still use Encyclopedia Britannica, but also with Google. The picture here of Sir Edward Codrington, and although unfortunately in mine, hang on, there we go. The Edward Codrington on the bottom right is very similar to the signature on that the previous slide. But Royal Navy, Sir Edward was Navy born and bred, included the Battle of Trafalgar, but it's particularly the last one that I draw your attention to, Battles of Wars, the Greek War of Independence, the Battle of Navarino. His instructions were to have a bit of a skirmish with the Ottomans and the Egyptians, but like all good admirals, given the opportunity, he actually decimated the fleet of the Ottomans and the Egyptians. And he got into trouble back in London for that, mainly because of the fact that the British government liked the idea of the Ottomans as a barrier between the Russians and India. So he got into trouble. But the fleet that he commanded was a combination of the French, the Russian, and the British fleets. That's why he got the Order of St. George from Russia. And he is much lauded in Greece because this was really the breakthrough of getting the Ottomans out of Greece that allowed Greece to form the nation that it is today. Or I'm not sure about the geographical limitations, but there are apparently Codrington streets around Greece. There are statues to him. He's something of a hero in Greece, and I rather enjoyed that. And when I told John this little bit of background on one of his items, he was absolutely chuffed. Okay, bit of background there. Next slide, then, please. This is really just the reminder of that, and it shows that the route by way of Gibraltar. Through the Straits to Malta, or alternatively by rail through Paris, Lyon to Marseille. Before we go on a little bit further, let me just draw your attention to the heel of Italy and Brindisi, because that's going to feature in the next slides. So Brindisi there, and as you'll see, some mail eventually in 1870 went by way of Brindisi, went up through the core of Italy. I was going to say Germany, but Prussia was more appropriate. Through Belgium, then Antwerp, Ostend, and then into England. So there was an alternative route which comes on the next slide. Thank you, Frank. This is from Mauritius. Stamp missing to draw the attention to the stamp or stamps, actually, probably plural. And this was when the Franco-Prussian War was on in 1870. They had to go to this Brindisi route rather than by way of Marseille. There was an incremental cost, but because they hadn't managed to tell Mauritius of this fact, they didn't charge the doubling of the deficiency. So the threepence was added. It's a very nice strike of the insufficiently paid by way of Brindisi route. So that's one cover from my Mauritius collection. The next one is actually went on the same vessel. The next slide, thank you, Frank. And this is one that I acquired very recently. Same vessel, same story. I draw your attention to the back. It's handled in London on December the 19th. It went to Cambridge before it was readdressed on December the 19th, and then got to Stanmore in Middlesex on the December the 19th as well. So all three of those things were done within the day, which I think is something of an achievement. I noticed that with interest that the threepence is deleted on the insufficiently paid. And my assumption is that the college, he was a professor within the college, paid that deficiency there, and it was then forwarded, but he didn't need to pay the threepence. That had been paid by the college. But anyone with any other theories, please let me know. And by the way, I think it may be best if we have questions after each of the individual sections. So that's probably the best way forward. Next one, thank you. Again, this is the third cover, and it fascinates me that these three covers all have stamps removed. Now, this one's from Sydney, and it doesn't have the threepence, which is the more typical version. But on the top left, you see a 2 with a dash just below the Via Marseille. So it was a double rate cover. And therefore didn't pay threepence, it paid sixpence, and the sixpence mark is visible there. The without the threepence mark was used for either things like newspapers, where there's always a lot of communication of newspapers, or examples of multiple rate covers. These marks are not all that common, and the ones without threepence on them are quite a bit rarer. But it fascinates me as to why specifically these three covers, and I've seen a number of others with this Brindisi premium, and none of them have, or a number of them have no stamps on them. So why they were particularly removed, I don't know. It's from a Stuart Gladstone. Now, the letter shows that he's a very well linked man. He's writing to his mother in Scotland. He's staying in Government House. And I wonder whether he's related to the Prime Minister, but he does mention that the Duke of Edinburgh is in Sydney at the time, but the Governor is quite pleased that the Duke of Edinburgh is staying in the Union Club rather than in Government House. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the time the Duke of Edinburgh, there was an assassination attempt on him in Sydney. So it's just an interesting bit of background, and he describes his travels around Australia. It's quite a fascinating letter. But one wonders whether he's related to the Gladstone, who was the Prime Minister, whose name, of course, is Gladstone, from which Gladstone in Queensland is taken. Okay, next one. Graham's next, but if there are any questions, feel free.
They're all very scarce marks, those the threepenny ones and the non-threepence, yes.
Yeah, they're not easy, but I rather enjoy them, but disappointed that there are quite a few around that do have stamps on them, but the fact that mine are stampless, which is disappointing, but you have to grab what you can.
Yeah, I've never been in a position to grab one, so they've been all very scarce, and I've always missed the ones that have passed by me.
Right. Well, with stamps, they do fetch quite a big price, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? In which case, then Frank, and I can't see Frank on my screen at the moment, but if Graham would like to come in and go through his slides. There he is.
Yep. Okay. Right, I've put in first a selection of stamps, of covers with the differing rates that apply to mail from the UK to Malta, which varied a bit over the years. Malta's always fascinated me. My father went to Malta after the war for his employment with Joseph Lucas, somehow travelling at some point on an aircraft carrier. He never told me very much about that, but after that, I always imagined Malta to be a little island right in the middle of the Mediterranean. It wasn't until I actually went there with a group a few years ago that I got it in its correct position between Africa and Sicily. So it's really down in the bottom corner. So in 1857 to 59, the rate was 9p. This is a cover with showing the rate at that stage. Paid for two fourpennies and a penny stamp. So that was the 9p rate. Okay, thanks, Frank. So in 1864, the rate was 6p, and this cover has a late fee. The late fee had to be paid in cash, but the postage could be paid. The postage could be paid in cash, but the late fee had to be paid with a stamp. So that's why we got a lot of covers in this period with just the late fee paid with the stamp, and only manuscript markings for the postage. Okay, thanks, Frank. In 1870 to 75, the rate became 8p, and this letter went through. John's shown us the different rates, different routes that applied on his map, so that's useful to the background of my covers as well. This letter went through France to Marseille and then by French packet to Valletta. So the rate at that stage was 6p. Okay, Frank. It's nice to get, because when the UPU rates came in on the 1st of July 1875, France elected not to apply the new rates until 6 months later on the 1st of January 1876. So during that 6 months, the mail that went through France always had a higher rate than if it was going to another country. If it went through France, it cost more than sending it through other countries other than France. So in this period, the rate to Malta direct through France was 4p, whereas the rate from the 1st of July 75 was only 2.5p for other countries. So these are two covers from the same correspondence. One showing the rate in the 6 months period where the rate was 4p, and in the later period after 1st of January 76, it became 2.5p like the other country rates. Okay, thanks, Frank. And this is another pair of covers showing the same thing, the same correspondence coming from Lostwithiel in Cornwall, which is quite a obscure place to get two covers going to France. And one other interesting point about this is you can clearly see that the one tuppenny halfpenny stamp is on the blued paper, which the first and second plates of the tuppenny halfpenny in the first printings were on blued paper, whereas later they switched to white paper. So that's clearly shown on these two covers as well. Okay, thanks, Frank. And this I rate as one of my favourite covers because I picked it up quite a few years ago now in an English postal bid sale. It's in this interim rate period again. The rate to Greece in this period was 6.5p if it went through France, but only 2.5p if it went through Belgium and other countries. So there was quite a difference, and I've come to realise that in fact it's probably a very scarce cover because when you think about it, the difference between 2.5p and 6.5p was quite a bit for that period, and unless you really wanted, there was some good reason for catching a particular postage date or something like that, wouldn't really be a good reason for paying an extra 4p on your postage. I've never seen any other cover to Greece in this period, so I think it's really quite a scarce cover. So I think I was very lucky to pick it up at that stage. And I just happened to see it in one of those obscure English postal bid sales and put in a bid which landed me the cover, so that's good. And also note that Greece was still using the Julian calendar in those days, so it's arrived. Of course, you could argue that's another reason for using the extra postage. It got there before it left, but it arrived in Greece on the 11th of August, whereas it was only posted on the 18th of August in London. Okay, thanks, Frank.
Hang on.
Well, we've got some security notice come up.
Mm.
Disable it.
Disable it, I think. That's it. It's gone. Yeah.
Yeah, but the next thing won't go through.
Ah,
Oh no.
What's happened?
We're being hacked.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and come bring it back again.
You got some nice covers there, Graham.
yeah, I like those. They're good. I've concentrated on that period. That 6 months has always fascinated me, the way the French mail had to be paid a bit more.
That's particularly nice. That the clear manuscript via France and Italy in very
Yes, yeah.
distinctive writing.
But they're very good quality covers too. They're very fine covers. Not just what's on them, but they're a good quality.
Yeah, it's always good to get good things showing what you want.
I noticed on the last time when we had the view of everyone that the Graham Claude triplets have joined us.
Doesn't want to let me share it.
Is it only that one?
All right, so what I'm going to do, stop sharing. Go into this here.
Nice to see you got there, Brian. You obviously got my email.
It
Brian,
arrived very, very late, John.
I know, because I had other things to do. I wasn't immediately at my computer. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. It's just that it worried me to death. That was all.
Frank, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Now, am I buggering you up? Because what I found was I killed my iPad, went onto my computer so I could look at what was going on. And now I've got the information you want on my computer, which doesn't have a camera. But now I'm able to hear you and you can hear me. So
that's fine.
But if I'm hurting your system, I'll kill the whole thing.
No, you're fine. No, which one were we up to? We're up to this one, weren't we, Graham?
Yeah, we were. Yep.
Yeah, that's it.
Now the next one.
Please.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. This is my final
it.
one. This again is this in this interim period. This is a registered cover in that period, which again, there's not many registered covers you find in that 6 months with the extra postage. It's also quite complicated because you'll see the French charge a registration fee as well as England then. So it's got an interim rate of threepence postage. Then there's a French registration fee, which was equal to the postage at that time. France at one point didn't charge the registration fee was always equal to what the postage was, as distinct from English mail. There was a postage at one rate and registration was another fixed amount, but the French scale meant that as the postage went up, so did the registration fee. So in this case, you've got sixpence postage for England, and then the French registration goes to sixpence as well. And there's also a late fee on this of fourpence. So total 1 and fourpence for this one letter.
That is a lovely cover.
It is.
So it's quite an interesting accumulation of markings and things. And of course, I always like the way the French put their transit stamps on. You see the Calais transit stamp always shows when it got there, and there'll be French. I haven't shown them here, but there'll be further transit marks on the back showing how it got to Dieppe. So the French system of postmarks is very good. Okay, that's all of mine, I think. Thanks, Frank.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Graham, I'm interested to know some correspondence of the value in those days. How much is fourpence? What is that equivalent to? $5? You know, do you have any idea?
Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. No, but it was. I mean, it was the local mail, of course, was still the penny postage. So
Yeah,
overseas rates were always a lot more.
yeah.
And so once you start to register and things like that, you start again. Of course, the registration started off at a shilling in 1840, but progressively came down until you got to well, at that stage it was sixpence, and then later on in 1878 it became fourpence, and then came down to twopence a bit later on.
Thank you.
Graham mentioned their French markings and registration. I don't know whether that cover has it on the back, but a registered cover that went through Paris would get a mark with a very precise weight on it. It would then get the number of seals that were on the back of the cover and what color they were. It's a fascinating piece of very precise markings on French transited registered mail. So something to look out for.
Yeah.
I have a question, if we have a moment.
Yeah,
My first question is, can you hear me okay? Because I changed
that's
microphone.
perfectly, Gerard.
Yep.
Yes, Darren.
What was the on that final cover there, the Dieppe cover? What was the annotation at the bottom left? I was trying to work that out. Forgive me if I mentioned it and I didn't catch it. Can we go back there, Frank?
No, we got going the wrong way.
Okay, well, let me.
Wait a minute. It's all right. I found it. It says, I think it's Seine Inférieure. It's the French district or the French department was Seine Inférieure. So that's you know, like Paris or Calais region or whatever. It's the region that it was going to. So Dieppe is in the department of Seine Inférieure.
Yes, I thought that's what I was reading, but I didn't know what it meant. Thank you.
We're having a problem with the slides again, Frank.
Yeah,
It's my fault, probably. Sorry.
no, it's not your fault. It's after when we press disabled, it just won't do its time.
Have you ever come across this problem before?
Never, first time.
I think it's Alan Shatton sabotaged it after I got onto my past my sixth slide.
Don't blame me.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Don't blame me.
I noticed, Robin, yours is not a name that I recognize, but can I just say welcome? Where are you based, Robin? Robin. Getting there.
There.
Oh, that was that
Getting
cover. Is that the cover that you?
Yeah, I think we've answered the bottom one, so on to the next one.
Yeah, that's the Seine Inférieure.
Yep. Okay.
Okay,
Alan,
Mr. Shatton, you're on.
over to
Okay,
you.
I've got three postal stationery collections, postal history. One of them is embryonic, and that's Malta. So I have three Malta covers. They're not quite of the standard of Graham's, but they have some interest. This is a private cover that's prepared by the Philatelic magazine in London. It shows a set of the coronation stamps issued on the 12th of May 37. And I think it was used for any country to any country. because Malta and England are handwritten. So it's an interesting cover. Next, please. There's two examples of Edward VII penny postcards. The Queen Victoria and Edward VII postcards that were issued with 1 penny values are all in red, and they all show vast ranges of colour. And if you could see the originals, the bottom right-hand one is much deeper than the top left-hand one. And the postmarks are different. The letter is an oval on the 1907 one, and it's a double circle on the 1911 one. They're both to Germany. Next slide, please. This is an older one. It's a letter from Pasquale Apap et Figli, which is in Sons, and it's to Palermo, just across the Mediterranean. It's got the A25 postmark of Malta and the duplexed circular date stamp. And it's got an arrival mark of Palermo. And it's got the correct rate of 2p halfpenny for letters up to ½ an ounce. I think the 1 at the top may have been applied in Sicily. It's not a Malta mark, I don't think. But it's an interesting piece of correspondence. Next slide, please. So my second collection, it's much larger than the Malta collection, is Sweden. I collect the postal stationery of Sweden, and Mediterranean examples of postal stationery in Sweden are scarce. But this is one to Egypt, to Alexandria on the Mediterranean. And the postmark PKXP is a travelling mail van postmark. The arrival mark is Alexandria, of course. And the catalogue that lists these, which is Facet, states that cards to Egypt are very, very rare. And the other thing about this card is if you look at the diagonal marking, it's RIP 29th September 1900. Now, the cards from Sweden, it's to Egypt. The text is in German, so I don't know what the RIP means. It could mean deceased, but I very much doubt it. Probably means something else. And if anyone can enlighten me, I'd be very happy.
Probably the date they replied, perhaps.
Sorry?
Could be the date they replied.
It could. It could. It's RIP.
No.
It could be riposte.
Yeah.
Contest, yeah.
I don't think the recipient died. Anyway, next slide, please. We'll now go to Tasmania, which is my main collection. This cover was sent from London to Rosedale, which is near Campbelltown in the northern part of Tasmania, via Marseille, which is, of course, on the Mediterranean. Got a ship letter inwards free mark, which is rated R, was the second version of the ship letter postmark. And it's addressed to John Leake. There's quite a bit of correspondence around addressed to John Leake. He was a member of the Legislative Council. His estate was called Rosedale, and in the bottom right-hand corner there's a photograph of the house, which was built in 1840. But the cars weren't there in 1840. That is pretty much the way the house, however, was originally built. Next slide, please, Frank. This is the last one of mine. It's a locally printed Penny Queen Victoria postcard, the same range of shade variations as the Malta cards that I started this presentation with. Posted from Ulverston on the northwest coast, transit mark Launceston, and it goes to Corsica. And postcards to Corsica from this period are not common. And Gary, who runs Abacus, said it was the first one that he'd ever seen. So I don't know if it's unique, but it's not very common at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well done.
Okay, now John McKay.
Thanks very much. My main interest also is in Sweden, and I have a particularly large collection of Swedish military postal history. I want to draw attention to the fact that the Mediterranean, the Eastern Mediterranean, has always been an area of extreme turmoil. Of course, we're seeing this every day now, but this goes back, and in my first slide, I go back to 1948 with the establishment of the State of Israel and the war that broke out at that time. So what I want to show today are 6 examples of Swedish military mail to and from Swedish peacekeeping forces in the Eastern Mediterranean. Sweden, from 1814 onwards, has been consistently neutral, at least until just a year or two ago, when Sweden, responding to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, applied to join NATO. One of the advantages that Sweden had in its neutrality was that everybody trusted it. And so Swedish peacekeeping forces were found everywhere, from North Korea to the Eastern Mediterranean to Bosnia and lots of other places. What the abandonment of Swedish neutrality will do to its contribution to peacekeeping forces is something I think I find particularly interesting given my collecting interests. So the first 2 slides are from Swedish servicemen operating in what was known as the United Nations Truce Supervision Organization, UNTSO, which was established by the United Nations in 1948 to supervise the truce between the forces of Israel and its neighbors. And the first cover is a rather rare cover from the head of the Swedish forces in Mahdi in Egypt, Brigadier Holmgren. Several interesting things about this cover. One is that it is using local stamps, Egyptian stamps. For most of the history of peacekeeping forces, and as we will see later, special post-free arrangements were made for United Nations personnel, but that really didn't happen until around 1956. And so before that, mail from the peacekeeping forces uses local stamps. And here is the first one, as I say, from Mahdi in Egypt, posted on the 3rd of March 1955. Postage is 62 million, and they are intact, I'm glad to say. Next one, please. This is also a relatively rare cover. In 1954, a 12-man team from the main Swedish peacekeeping force in Egypt was sent for a special operation in Ethiopia, and a Major Galerjo was sent to Addis Ababa, and he sent this letter back to Sweden, posted on the 13th of June 1955, again using local Ethiopian mail rather than the special mail that we'll see later on. And sometimes mail from the peacekeeping forces also use Swedish stamps, as we'll see. Next one, please. We're hearing a lot about Egypt, and well, not so much about Egypt at the moment, but I'll come on to Lebanon in a minute. In 1956, a United Nations emergency force which is called UNEF-1 in the United Nations lexicon, was established and again as a peacekeeping force between Egypt and Israel. And here is an example of a letter sent from the Swedish peacekeeping battalion, which used its own military stationery. You'll see in the top left there for the Swedish peacekeeping battalion. And it also had its own registered mail sticker shown there on the left. And this letter sent to Gothenburg uses Swedish stamps to the value of 80 euro. 80. Many peacekeeping forces use Swedish postal rates and use Swedish stamps. In this particular case, the domestic postal rate was 80 euro, and most peacekeeping forces were not charged the overseas rate, but charged the local rate. And there's an extra 5 euro for the registration. Next one, please. The UNEF-1 was re-established in 1973 as a new emergency force called UNEF-2, and operated the Swedish contingent operated particularly in the Sinai, again to separate Egyptian forces from Israeli forces. Now here is, for those of you who don't know this particular bit of Swedish military stationery, something quite interesting and something quite unique. The Swedish military letter was something like an aerogram with, as the stamp shows, a post-free mark, allowing soldiers to send letters to their family, particularly to their family, free of charge. But the interesting thing was that on the flap of the envelope of these military letters, there was a stamp which the family could cut out and stick on a letter to be sent back, again free of charge, to their family member in whatever part of the world they were serving. So that's, see, this is sent from the Swedish forces operating in the Sinai Desert. And again, another interesting thing is that all mail to and from Swedish peacekeeping forces went through Malmö in southern Sweden. So return addresses on all of this kind of peacekeeping mail always shows the return address as whatever post code in Malmö in Sweden. It was then bulked and sent out to the members of the peacekeeping forces. Next one, please. Here is from, now we've moved over to the Swedish peacekeeping forces in Lebanon. The UN Interim Force in Lebanon, UNIFIL, established in 1978, and which is still operating. What I should have said from the very first slide, where the Swedish contingent was in Egypt, that the Swedish forces are still there, and so far 1,060 Swedes have served in that peacekeeping force, and 6 of them have been killed on duty. In 1978, as I said, the Lebanon peacekeeping force was established, And here is a parcel address card sent to Sweden by a UN soldier in the Lebanon, posted in 1984. It's interesting from several points of view. The purple stamp shows that no customs duty was paid on the parcel that was sent. It's interesting that postage in all of these cases was free, but customs duty was still charged on any goods that were sent. And this stamp at the bottom says that the sender did not pay any duty. It had to be paid at the arrival, and a charge, you'll see somewhere on it, it says a charge of 40 krona was to be paid. It appears from the parcel post that the soldier was in fact sending a parcel to himself in Sweden, and the contents are listed there as kläder, which is clothing, and presumably he got someone to pay the 40 krona for him. Next, please. Again, another military letter from a rather different part of the Mediterranean now. In 1964, when fighting broke out between the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots, and then when Turkey invaded Cyprus and established the current division of the island into two parts, Sweden was asked to send a peacekeeping force to Cyprus in 1964, and something over 2,500 Swedes have served in that peacekeeping force. And here you see a military letter of the. There are. Don't really have time to talk about this now, but there are 13 different types of military letters, and currently I'm in the process of writing a series of articles for Scandinavian Contact, which is the journal of the Scandinavian Philatelic Society, about these 13 different varieties of military letters. And here you see type F for Facet Catalogue 11C, a letter sent again via Malmö. The return address is given as Malmö as usual, and you see from the postmark the Swedish battalion in Cyprus. Next, or is that the last? Yes, that's the last. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Excellent and very, very diverse. But any questions or comments for John before we move on?
I'd just like to say I really like the African colours around the Ethiopian letter. The colours with a different twist.
Okay, Graham Plore, let's see how we go with you and your phone.
Yeah, see how it's on an absolute shambles. Seeing pictures and no sound, and sounds and no pictures. Now, okay, let's start with the first slide. If you can hear me clearly.
Hearing John?
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, you're fine.
Good.
Okay, right. The first one is a postcard that I have. That 19th of February 1916, Cairo, and on active service. No stamps, of course. It's quite a pleasant note. I'll read just a couple of lines from it. Just to home saying, all is well here. Looking around Heliopolis, there was at the aerodrome Camp Heliopolis near Cairo that they were stationed at initially. We've had a good look around Heliopolis and Cairo, and we're having a night. There are some nice places here. We're getting about quite a lot. And I hope that Albert, who is a friend of theirs, is in a nearby camp, and he's getting on okay as well. Now, it all sounds very pleasant. I got another postcard which I haven't shown, but I've shown some words. The first one, of course, was in February. This one's in April the 17th of the same year. Dear Rose, just a note to let you know, a welcome letter that I suppose you've sent the papers that we're having a pretty hard time. It's a cruel way that people have to leave their homes there in the place and leave their places just as they left them with everything. I will now close, and please tell Albert, who's in the other cab, of course, that we're fighting back all over the same ground again. So it went from being very pleasant to being very awful in a very short space of time. And I've tried to track this chap down, not a lot, but a little, and have not been able to trace what happened to him. But I thought these two postcards that I've got are quite dramatic in their sense of difference. Thanks, Frank. The next one. This is a incoming mail from Cyprus to Melbourne, and in 18th of January of 1940. Now this has been sent to from obviously a member of the family to the guy I knew, John Keogh on the envelope. I knew he was a young lad at the time, and one of the significant things of the actual letter itself, although it had a number of passed by censorship signals in Cyprus and also in Australia, and special note written in English. When it did hit Melbourne, the censors the slide after they opened the letter and sealed it again, the censors seal, was a very early one in Melbourne, because you'll notice three little dots at the top left-hand corner are penciled in. They're not printed form. They printed them after they got going, but this is very early in the piece. But that's by the by. But of course, this period of time between October 31 and October 40 was a very difficult time for the Cypriots, because Sir Richard Palmer there had enormous repressive measures on everything that went, and it was aimed to prevent all the local public having any interest in politics. There were strong protests against that regime, and the measures were not lifted until the beginning of the Second World War, during which more than 30,000 Cypriots had joined the British Armed Forces during that time of war. And so that's all for that one. Thanks, Frank. Next one is one from Palestine to Leek in New South Wales to a bank. He must have been running out of money and needed some or something. But the significance is the CDS, which was from the Division Supply Headquarters, Post Office SM1, and used at Camp Julius. Now, Camp Julius was just set up in 1940, early 1940. In fact, February of 1940 it started in southern Palestine. And this postmark was sent over specifically for that purpose. It stayed in that particular Camp Julius, I think, right throughout World War II. Thanks, Frank.
Sweetie, I think I'm up.
Sorry. Right, cool, thank you. Right. Another incoming mail to Australia in World War II, from Egypt to Victor Harbour in South Australia. Now, this one is a very early use of the date stamp that is not particularly clear. That's with the #1 AIF base postal unit. They brought that mark across with them from Australia, and the mark was later used in Cairo. At that time, the first convoy of troops had arrived in Palestine on the 14th of February in 1940 and was established in Jerusalem later that month. And by September 40, the date stamp was then moved to Merthyr Matur in Egypt, and later on it then moved to Tantra, where it was used up until September of 1942. After that time, there's no record of what happened to the postmark, but it certainly got around a bit. And it was brought over in this particular first issue at the time I've just been speaking of. So it's an interesting postmark, a reasonably clear one, and almost can see the date sensibly on it as well. Thanks, Frank. I was just struggling to get Mediterranean material, as John will know, because I was it's not my area of interest particularly, but this one is another incoming mail to Australia, Italy to Australia, and sent February 1950, and arrived as a registered letter from an attorney in Italy, Udine, I suppose. I don't know how you pronounce that.
They usually say.
And as a result of that, it went to the Supreme Court in Melbourne and arrived there by the 21st of February of that year. It's just a colourful and nice appearing cover. It's not in great shape, but it's in reasonable condition. So that was my second last one, and my last one, Frank, is not what it says on the bottom. It doesn't contain lottery tickets at all. It contains an application form to go and buy lottery tickets. You apparently took off on this. This incidentally came from Malta to Moorabbin. And there's about 12 in the box. And you simply filled out your name on the left-hand side and sent it back with your money and kept the right-hand half, which was your chance to say you had won the lottery. Now, I hadn't really had a close look at this until I was asked to do this presentation. I looked at it and I noticed that there's a form inside. The form inside, which I'm having trouble finding now, says that you have to have, you should buy 12 copies of this. Now, why the heck you buy 12? And there are 12 items in here, by the way. Why you have to buy 12, I don't know, because you were going to send them back anyway, whether you're going to only send one or 5. So I have no idea what's going on. But this Malta stamp of the 29th of July 1970 obviously was never used and was a most unsuccessful venture all round, and somebody lost their life. Thanks, Frank.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for doing it under very difficult circumstances. Any questions of Graham before we move on?
I just want to apologise to Graham that I unmuted myself shortly before yelling out to my wife, thinking I was muting myself.
That's all right.
Okay. If we go on to the next slide, then thank you, Frank. This is from Edward's collection. A rate to the Papal States, 11 pence up to an ounce via Belgium in those times, or it could be via France and Austria, also 11 pence, but up to a quarter of an ounce, so a slight difference. But I thought a rather nice, tidy looking item. The 9 pence on cover with, I think it's plate number 4, is quite a high valued stamp on cover, but Graham would probably know. Graham, as in Hayward, would probably be able to confirm that. But that's what the catalogue says. But I think it's quite an attractive cover. Next one, thank you. This is an interesting one, and I mentioned Graham in the last one, but Graham also gave Edward some very careful, very knowledgeable input about this cover. It's to Messina in Sicily, or it says Sicilia, which is what my atlas shows it as, rather than Sicily as we know it. And it was the rates from 1861 were as for Sardinia, and that's what is it? We got there 1 and 6pence, I think. No, 1 and 9pence. Sorry, that's
yeah, one and 6pence plus a late fee of a penny.
That's right. And then there's a late fee of a penny, and this is late fee is Graham's particular niche of interest, and he believes that the double diamond 48 Chancellor could well be used in the Inland Office and possibly used on late mail, but not confirmed as such, but a high probability. Again, the stamps are a high catalogue value on cover. I think that's an attractive cover to Messina, which must be, I think, a fairly rare destination. Next one, thank you. This is quite a lot more modern. This is a philatelic cover because it's from Whitfield and King in Ipswich, but it's got Tangier and Morocco agencies covers, and the British had post offices in parts of Morocco at the time. And on the next slide and the last slide from Edward's material, if you go onto that, Frank, a very philatelic cover. It's going from Tetuan, and on the map on the right, which is curved because that's the way it appears in the atlas, by the way. The Tetuan is on the just within the Mediterranean, and it's going to Tangier, which is right on the tip of Morocco. I was rather fascinated. I didn't know where Tetuan was, but when I looked at the map, that I found that the place just above it, Ceuta, it was Spanish Morocco, was the very first place outside England I ever visited. So it was an interesting little spot to go to. So it was a bit of a reminder for me, but very philatelic cover, but an attractive cover nonetheless in Edward's collection.
First day cover.
I'm sorry?
It's a first day cover, I think.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is a first day cover. But attractive, but very philatelic, and not really travelling very far, particularly paying the pound type of value, because it's not a great distance between Tangier and Tetuan. That's all from Edward's collection, but I thought it'd be just a nice thought just to include some of his material, and say the family were very supportive of doing that. I don't know if there are any questions on that. I don't imagine so, because I think it overlaps some of the things that have been done before. So
yeah, John.
Yeah, sure.
The second last cover.
Yeah.
You said that was posted in Sussex.
Yes. Suffolk.
But how come it had Tangier and Morocco agency stamps?
Well, I don't know. They must have been acceptable in the English mail system, I suppose.
They were allowed to use them up in England in the later period, I think. They were prohibited at first, but then I think they were allowed to use them in England.
Good heavens.
Wow. Yeah. We've all learned something there, Alan.
Yeah, so I have.
Thank you for asking. Gerard, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much, John. And I will say, if my internet starts to go a bit ropey, just wave your hands furiously and I'll run to the other end of the house where the signal is a bit stronger. Starting quite modern here, this is a cover from 1989, which I bought recently. It's off to Todi, which is in Perugia. It's right in the middle of the boot or the leg of Italy, really. And I bought it for that 1 cent stamp, believe it or not, because I collect those living together stamps on cover. And usually they are upgrading a 36-cent stamp to a 37-cent stamp, but this is a much more unusual usage, paying a 56-cent surface mail rate off to Italy. And what I've learned is that the very day this was postmarked, the rates had actually just gone up. So whichever nonna or nun was sending this off to Italy managed to get away with saving herself either 9 cents or 29 cents, depending on whether she was sending a greeting card or a letter. So well done there. But yeah, just a bit of the kind of scarce modern usage that I'm into that mostly would go unrecognized. Thanks, Frank. Next one. Last year, my wife and I went to France, and I'm not usually a postcard collector, but we thought it would be a nice way to remember our trip would be to collect a few postcards when we got to Paris, and I started fossicking in the stamp market. So this is one. We did visit Monaco, and that's the Cathedral of Monte Carlo, which has been sent on a postcard in 1935, I think, of the 1933, sent just down the coast to Antibes. But so that was just quite an attractive postcard, and I have a whole bag of them. So we're about to see a couple more of them from the same trip, Frank, if you would. So a couple of postcards here. I'm cheating a bit, and I may get kicked out of the club, but at the top is a postcard from Nice, and I had to include it because if you look at the right-hand side of that postcard, you do see the actual Mediterranean. So, but it was so the fronts are on the left and the backs are on the right, and you can see the top one. In fact, both of these. No, I take that back. The top one was sent undercover, so it doesn't actually have a stamp on it or any useful markings for our interest. And then down the bottom is Monte Carlo Casino, which does have the stamp on the front of the postcard. Or I think that's the back in postal stationery terms, where the photo is, and then a bit of writing. My French is not quite good enough to fill you in on what was being said. I haven't really haven't had the time to dig into what was actually the contents of the postcards, but just a couple of really just included here for the pretty pictures. For Frank, if you'd like to move on to the next one. We live in Mentone here in Melbourne, so while we're in the south of France, we thought let's check out the original Mentone, which it was Mentone at the time that it was named here in Melbourne, but it's now Menton in France. But we can hurtle through this screen pretty quickly because the top one has, again, it's traveled undercover, so there's no postal history on it, and the bottom one is completely unused. So we better move along before before people start getting grumpy. My wife has a Greek background, and this is something of sentimental interest. A couple of letters that she gave me. We did lose her a year or two ago, unfortunately, but so these are letters from the town of Kozani, which is just out of Thessalonica, not far from the northern reaches of the Mediterranean. Now, if you have a look, you'll actually see that the frankings there are exactly the same on these letters, which were sent from a friend back in the old country to my wife's yaya in 1995. So and I like the additional color of the express labels as well. Unfortunately, yaya tended to really rip her envelopes to shreds as she was reaching for the letters. So I do have a few of these letters, and they're probably not exactly in exhibitable condition, but they mean a lot to me sentimentally. Frank, we can move on to the next one. A couple.
Internet's gone.
Syria, which I only recently realized are all headed off to the same. Oh, sorry.
What's going on and off?
On again.
Sorry, can you hear me? Just checking.
Yep.
Okay. So yes, Syria is a side interest for me because I studied in Syria before the war and visited a number of times. So I've enjoyed a couple of Middle Eastern touches because it was Arabic that I was studying. So I've enjoyed the Middle Eastern touches tonight. And I have a stash of correspondence. Well, actually, it's not really correspondence. It's all one-way mail from various Syrian perfume dealers, I think they are, because they're all being sent to this company, Givaudan, in Switzerland. So these are some covers that date to the United Arab Republic era, which was when Syria merged with Egypt to become the United Arab Republic. Didn't last very long. The one on the left, you see the back and the front because it's the most interesting of the lot. It's got a registration sticker on it going from Aleppo through to Switzerland. It's even got a wax seal on the back, which was starting to get a bit rare in those days. And then the other one just fills out the space on the right-hand side, just a anti-malaria stamp. I do collect Syria, as I mentioned, so if you've ever got any Syria spare, then let me know. And on that note, if you ever need some help decoding any Arabic, here as well. Frank, we can move along. This must be my last one, I think, off the top of my head.
That was the last.
Oh no, that
one.
was the last one. There we go. Well, that's good. I was getting
Gone
bored
back
of
to
the sound of
mine
my
again.
own voice.
Yeah,
Thank you
was
for
the
that.
last one.
Thank you, Gerard. I rather like what you just said right at the end of your presentation there, that if ever you need help with Arabic. I was very grateful when Graham Hayward helped Edward Brentnell, as I described, and that's one of the hopes of the Postal History Group, is that we can all learn and share our knowledge, and those who can get to the meetings in the evening would find there's quite a lot of exchange of knowledge, and that's one of the things our club should be very keen on doing. So I was really very pleased to hear the way you gave me a segue there to make that particular point. But any other questions? A very diverse display, as we would expect. We cut this hobby in 1,000,001 ways, don't we? And it's wonderful that we do. But any comments or questions?
Ian's got his hand up there, I think, unless he's done it accidentally.
No, that's just saying thank you.
All right. I might add that I also
it's a expression of applause for the standard of stuff we've been watching. Good on you.
I meant to add that I also stayed with some friends in Cairo, and I stayed in Al Mahdi and even sent mail from the Al Mahdi post office back home to the family. So I enjoyed your Al Mahdi cover. I think with John, it was with the Swedes.
Yeah.
That was a nice personal touch too.
Well, having been through the Suez Canal a couple of times, that's about the best I can do on all of that. It's just one of my hobby horses. The expression is often used, the overland mail. Now there are three versions of overland. One is the England to Marseille over France by rail. The other one is Alexandria to Suez before the canal was built. And then there's a third one, which is across India, where mail would often go to Calcutta and then be carried across the bulk of India to Bombay to catch the East India Company vessels bringing mail back to the UK, all of which were on occasion called overland mail. Just a little bit of a note. I think we always want to make sure that we describe which of those three we're talking of.
I think, John, actually, there could even be a fourth, because I think sometimes they call it overland mail when it went through Basra, going sort of, I forget the exact route, but sort of going northeast from Cairo and trying to get through that way.
Yes, that is another version. Yep, but that's very rare, though. I think, because in my reading of Indian mail, it's very rare that was used. But it's certainly, you're right, it was done that way. Any other questions, comments? In which case, what it remains for me is to thank those that contributed tonight for their contributions. As I say, a very diverse display, all of very high quality. So thank you all very much for the time and effort you put into putting it forward, and thank you, Frank, for being our master of ceremonies as ever. So
sorry about the little glitches, but don't know what happened there.
Yeah, well. Anyway, we got through, and where's Graham as in Plor now? Is he?
I think he's gone off.
Okay. And Robin, I got your message. I noticed there that you haven't got a speaker, but welcome nonetheless. And I think that's all I have to say. But to say thank you very much for your.
Can I just ask? Excuse me, John. Brian Fuller, have you changed your email address, because the last one I sent you bounced?
Oh, Brian Fuller 43 at gmail.com.
Gmail.com. Brian Fuller 43. Oh, it all spelled out just like that.
Yes.
I don't know how he got his age onto his.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I know. I thought he was older than that, but anyway.
Okay, thank you all very much indeed.
Unfortunately,
sorry.
I was going to say, unfortunately, people don't check their bounced mail to ring me up and say, "Oi, what is it?"
Brian, I hate to tell you, but life's too short.
I agree, John.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye.
Okay.